Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Sunil Sangra.
The first notion that I really want to talk to you about is that the past that we have come from has largely been linear. In a linear world, it is relatively easy to try and determine what the future might look like because it's a straight line. So you look at data for the last 5 or 10 years, run a regression, or extrapolate that data into the future, and you can start basing your decisions for the next 5, 10 years, and you'll be reasonably okay. But the future that we are getting into is going to be increasingly nonlinear and in many cases exponential. And that is why the traditional ways of thinking, working, and doing, which have worked so well for us in the linear world, which is about logical thinking, analytical thinking, sequential thinking, may not be adequate for this nonlinear exponential future that we are getting into. And that is why it makes sense for us to equip ourselves with a new range of tools and capabilities, which will perhaps help us navigate this future in a better way. And that's where nonlinear thinking, nonlinear working, doing comes in, and where design thinking comes in as one of the approaches to address that. And this gentleman said it a long time back that it's cliched, I know, everybody talks about change, but the couple of things what he says which are interesting is that it is not the strongest of the species that survives. It is not the most intelligent, but the ones which are most responsive to change. And think about it for a moment. Whether it is at the level of you and me as individuals, or at the level of a nation, or at the level of a society, chances are what Charles Darwin had said applies to all of these different levels, right? And this is taken from a wonderful book called A Whole New Mind, written by Daniel Pink. And what Daniel Pink is basically bringing out over here is that as we have evolved from the agricultural age to the industrial age to the information age, the 21st century is going to be the conceptual age, the age of the conceptual worker, where creativity, innovation, serving, experiences are going to be critical. And that is where perhaps design thinking becomes so relevant. Some quick data points that I'm going to share with you to help you understand why is design thinking important. So this is a report which came out from the Design Council in the UK in 2007. And their research showed that businesses which have a stronger design thinking orientation have had returns which are double that of the rest of the FTSE 100, right? And this was about 13 years ago. This is more recent. In 2016, the Design Management Institute in the US did a similar research, and their research showed that organizations which had a stronger design thinking orientation ended up giving returns which are more than 200% higher than the broader stock market. And even more recently, this is taken from an article that came out in the McKinsey Quarterly, where they talk about the business value of design. And their research shows that organizations which have practiced design thinking have outperformed the others by a margin of more than 2:1. Yeah. And very recently, just about 6 months back, Coursera came out with this report whereby they said that design thinking was the #1 ranked trending business skill in 7 out of 9 industries globally, right? So there is increasing evidence to show that design thinking is relevant. More and more organizations are beginning to embrace it. They are finding value in it, and so on. So what is design thinking? Let's try and address this. The starting point for design thinking is that people are at the center of everything that we do. Whether it's a B2B organization or a B2C organization, doesn't matter. It's eventually all in the context of people. And if people are at the center, if our customers, our users are at the center, then how do we go about trying to identify what is it that people might want at a much deeper level? That means you really need to immerse yourself in the context of your user and your customer. And a couple of you, when you were talking about the debate, brought out this whole issue of empathy, right? So the critical piece here is how can we immerse ourselves with our users, with our customers at a level whereby we can actually empathize with them. We can identify what are their unarticulated needs and wants. Because very often people may want something, but are unable to articulate it for whatever reason. And therefore, borrowing from tools from sociology, of anthropology, of ethnography, how can we uncover those hidden needs that people might have? So how can we identify what people want? Having done that, the next part of the piece is, uh, once we've identified that need, can we actually go ahead and address that need? Can we deliver upon it? Can we actually do it? Is it feasible? Right? And if that is also established, the third part is, can we do it in a way that it makes business sense, whereby the user perceives a value out of the offering that has been created, and the business also is able to create a value for itself, and therefore it's a win-win proposition for the key stakeholders that are involved in the entire thing. Yeah. In other words, it's about establishing desirability, feasibility, and viability, and design thinking is at the intersection of all three. So that is one way of articulating it. And then there is also this other approach, or other approach that really builds upon this thought. And this is taken from the D School at the University of Stanford in the US. Now, the D School at Stanford has been created out of a donation of $35 million given by a gentleman called Hasso Plattner. Hasso Plattner is a German. He's the co-founder of SAP. SAP, as you know, is one of the largest enterprise resource planning solution companies in the world. And roughly about 12, 13 years ago, Hasso Plattner was approached by one of the professors of design thinking at Stanford to say that you believe a lot in design thinking, we believe a lot in design thinking, we want to set up a new school that will promote and evangelize design thinking, can you help us? So Hasso Plattner funded the establishment of the D School at Stanford. He gave out a check of $35 million. And it's now called the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford, and that is the logo of the school. It's popularly known as the D School. And the D School, in contrast to the B School, the business school, right? That is the thought behind this. So the D School's approach to design thinking looks something like this: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. Like I said earlier, empathize is all about how can we immerse ourselves into the context of our consumers and our users at a deeper level, such that we are able to identify those unstated, unarticulated needs that people might have. And from that understanding, are we able to define and identify maybe 3 or 4 areas, 5 areas, which are critical to enabling the kind of solution or offering that the user or the customer might want? How can we bring in a whole new level of creativity and imagination towards often looking at intuitive solutions to the problem, right? We don't have time to get into this, but a lot of design thinking is also considered to be what is called abductive thinking. So traditionally, we've been used to deductive and inductive logic. Abductive logic is where you say that there is an outcome that people want, which is a valid outcome, but this outcome is not predicated on what we know or what we've been doing in the past. And therefore, we need to allow ourselves perhaps a logical leap of the mind to be able to explore these new outcomes. And that is why a whole new level of ideation, creativity, imagination comes into play. And I saw evidence of that in some of the things that you were sharing. For example, when Kanchan shared the wonderful example of how she helped his family, there was a level of empathy in this. There was a level of, I think, ideation and imagination. You were able to define what are the critical issues and parameters. So I saw a practice of design thinking in this. And I think architects are basically, in a way, born natural design thinkers because their profession demands that. Once you've come out with a range of ideas for your problem, how can you quickly bring those ideas to the real world by way of a prototype and actually begin to start testing that idea with your users? And this is important because the normal human tendency is we get an idea and we fall in love with it. And the longer we stay with that idea, the more in love we fall with it. And that is why it is critical to start testing your ideas, start building your ideas as quickly as you can. And when you build the initial prototypes, these need not be high fidelity prototypes. They can be very low cost, low risk, low fidelity versions of your idea, such that your user can interact with what your idea is by way of a tangible product or by way of a role play or an experience. And then the user can share what he or she feels about that idea. And that sharing, that feedback is extremely important because it really helps you see what is working for the user and what is not. And you use that iteratively till you get to the second, third, fourth, fifth prototype and eventually reach a solution that works well for the user in terms of the needs that they have articulated for themselves. So it's a so empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test is one simple explanation of what the design thinking process might look like. A critical thing here is that this is an iterative process. So it's a non-linear iterative process that enables teams and organizations to often arrive at truly innovative solutions to some pretty complex problems. Here's another very simple explanation of what the design thinking process might look like. So Tim Brennan, who's a part of the creative design office at Apple, he was asked, how do you explain design thinking? And he drew this squiggle on the board. And what he was trying to say is that the early phase of a design thinking process is extremely fuzzy. That's the time when there is a very high level of uncertainty. In fact, to some extent, to succeed with design thinking, we also need the ability to be able to embrace uncertainty and be comfortable in that space. And initially, it can be very disturbing, very uncomfortable for a lot of people. But if you allow yourselves the opportunity, if you have the conviction that yes, if you apply the right kind of rigor to the entire process, chances are you'll come out with an interesting outcome. But the initial uncertainty is often something that people struggle with. But if you continue with your research in that period of uncertainty, then chances are gradually some patterns or insights will begin to start emerging. The thought or an idea of a concept or a prototype will take shape. And eventually there'll be more clarity and the final solution will be the outcome. So you move from a stage of being of high uncertainty towards an interesting, new, innovative, creative outcome for the problem that you're working on. Here are some examples of organizations that are extensive users of design thinking. And as I'm sure all of you will be familiar with all of these organizations. And Airbnb, for example, is a relatively new entrepreneurial organization. And the founders of Airbnb owe their success. They've said this in so many interviews that a few years ago, I was there in Singapore for a brainstorm design conference, and one of the founders happened to be there. And they elaborated how design thinking is what really helped them reach Airbnb to the level where it is today. And more organizations across sectors, across industries are now beginning to adopt this, not only in the business world, but also in social organizations, NGOs, government, and so on. And this is what this gentleman had to say. Apple has been one of the pretty significant practitioners of design thinking. In fact, my interest in design thinking evolved roughly about, I would say, 9-10 years ago. I used to do a lot of work in the area of strategy. I used to help organizations with their strategy formulation and, more importantly, their strategy execution processes. I was part of Kaplan and Norton's team in India. Kaplan is the professor from Harvard Business School who created the balanced scorecard framework. And that's the time I saw a lot of organizations talking about the need to innovate, but really struggling to make it happen. And as I started getting deeper into innovation, design thinking popped up. I mean, the question that popped up is, why is a company like Apple consistently rated as the most innovative company in the world? And when I went deeper into that, I figured out that design thinking is at the core of what they do. And that's what got me interested in design thinking, because when I first came across it, it appealed to me intuitively that this makes a lot of sense. So let me quickly run a few examples with you about the practice of design thinking. And because of the prevailing environment, I thought I would pick examples from the healthcare sector, because even without the current situation that we are in, healthcare is perhaps one of the most challenging sectors before society. So I'm going to quickly walk you through some examples. And this is an example taken from a company called GE. GE, as you know, is a diversified company. One of the business divisions also makes medical equipment. And what you see here is a MRI scanning machine. So the people who made these MRI machines at GE were very proud of their work. You know, we are saving lives and so on and so forth. Until one day, one of them happened to be in a hospital and he noticed that there was this little girl who had to get a scan done. And she was crying. She was petrified about getting into this machine because it's a very narrow, claustrophobic space. You're supposed to lie still. When the scan happens, the magnets are moving around, creating funny noises. So, very disturbing for a small child. And therefore, about 80% of children or 80% of the children who need a scan need to be sedated. Now, nobody wants to take a sedative and leave alone a child. So these people at GE were horrified to learn about this, and they said, "Let us see if we can innovate around this." So what they did was they painted the entire room, the MRI room, and the machine into an adventure. And like this, they created a series of adventures. So the one here is the Pirate Island adventure. And they started telling the children as they were going in for the scan, you know what, we're going to play a game. And in this game, you're going to be going into the pirate ship. But if you lie absolutely still and don't make a noise, the pirates will not be able to find you. And we'll end up winning the game. And children started treating this like an adventure. And gradually word spread, you go to the hospital, you get to play this lovely adventure. And therefore, the number of children that needed to be sedated, needed to be given a sedative, came down significantly. And all of this done using a design thinking approach. Let's look at some examples around healthcare in the Indian context. So what you see here is an infant in an incubator, and when babies are born premature, they often don't have sufficient body fat on them to be able to retain the temperature of 37 degrees Celsius that the human body needs. And therefore, these kind of babies need to be placed in incubators, at times for a day or two, in some cases for a week or more, and in some extreme cases, even for a month or so. And it so happens that we have a lot of babies born premature in rural India. The reasons are many. One of the main reasons is poor nutrition for the mother. Now, these babies need these kind of incubators, but the primary healthcare centers that we have in rural India do not have the budgets to afford these kind of incubators, because something like this costs about $15,000 to $20,000. So, four young students started working on this problem at the D School in Stanford. Two of them Indian students. They came down to India, spent a lot of time in the field in terms of empathizing with the various stakeholders, and they came out with a solution. And any idea what the cost of the solution might be? It's $25. So what they created was this product called, the company is called Embrace, and they have this infant baby warmer, which looks like a sleeping bag, but it's not an ordinary sleeping bag. At the back of the bag is a phase change material. It's a wax-like substance. If you put it in hot water, it will melt to a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius in a few minutes. And you take out the pouch, put it at the back of the bag, put the baby in the bag, and the baby is good for the next 4 to 6 hours. Every 4 to 6 hours, repeat the cycle. It just takes a few minutes. Over 300,000 babies in more than 30 countries around the world have already benefited from this innovation. Right. Let me take one or two quick more examples and then we'll conclude. So this is Dr. Venkataswamy. And the reason I'm sharing this example is because Dr. Venkataswamy is no more, but if you had gone and met him and asked him about design thinking, chances are he would have looked at you quizzically, what are you talking about? The point I'm trying to make is that design thinking is not alien to us. I am firmly of the belief that design thinking is basic human nature. And it's just that over the last few decades, there is a certain body of knowledge that has evolved, which is making an attempt to codify it, to develop a range of tools that allow us to practice it in a more structured way. But basic human nature, to my mind, is design thinking. And let me try and explain that through the help of this example. So Dr. Venkataswamy was extremely pained to realize that there are so many people who are needlessly going blind in Tamil Nadu, because that's where he used to operate from. And many of them were in rural parts of Tamil Nadu. And the reasons were either these people did not know that they have cataract, which is very easy to treat, or even if they knew they had cataract, they did not have the means to go to the city and get themselves treated. And that's where, look at the level of empathy Dr. Venkataswamy had. He said that if they can't come to me, let me go out to them, right? And that's where the entire mobile eye care clinic movement started in India. And a lot of people were prevented from needlessly going blind and so on. And they innovated. Not only did they go out into the field and reach the people, they also innovated with the entire process for doing cataract surgery, such that they were able to bring the cost down substantially. Because their objective was to that everybody who needs this treatment should be able to get it, regardless of whether he or she is able to pay for it or not. And therefore they have a very high level of patients who are treated free of cost. Those are offset by the people who are willing to and are able to pay for it. And despite operating with such high levels of philanthropy, this organization continues to be a profitable organization, right? And so the point here is that Dr. Venkataswamy is a practitioner of design thinking, although he does not know what design thinking is. Here's another example. If you've heard of Jaipur foot, so this is about people who have lost their limbs and need a artificial prosthetic or a limb. So once again, very often the kind of people who come to Jaipur foot are daily wage earners. And think about it for a moment. If a person is a daily wage earner, they have to travel from outside Jaipur to Jaipur. In the process, they have to incur the cost of travel. They have to forego their daily wages for the 2 or 3 days that it might take to get that limb fitted. And they have to spend money also in finding a place to stay and food to eat in Jaipur while they're there and so on. Very difficult for a daily wage earner. So earlier, the process at Jaipur Fort for a person to get a limb would take 2 or 3 days. The people at Jaipur Fort empathize with this problem of the users. And today what happens is a user comes in the morning and walks out by late or middle afternoon with the customized artificial limb fitted and working in every aspect, right? So this, to my mind, is another example of design thinking. But if you go to the people at Jaipur Foot and ask them, hey, can you tell us about design thinking? Chances are they won't know what you're talking about. So that is why I repeat the point that this is not something which is alien to us. This is our basic human nature. And if we can bring more of this into our practice in whatever it is that we are doing, even the topic of the debate that we had, that in these troubled times, how can an organization respond more creatively to the challenges of on the one hand, organizational sustenance, and on the other hand, of ensuring that the employees and other stakeholders are not severely impacted. Chances are we can bring design thinking into play even to address issues like these.